Hello and welcome to Season 5, Episode 10 of Logicast, the AWS News podcast brought to you by Logicata. I'm Carl Robinson, CEO and co-founder of Logicata, and I'm joined today, as always, by Principal Cloud Engineer and a man who seems to have missed his weekend, John Goodall. How are you doing today, John?
I'm tired. I'm so tired.
Oh, dear. For the people who are not on YouTube, I am doing the world's smallest violin gesture in my to my camera. What's made you tired this week?
Oh, it's self-inflicted. I schlepped myself over to Reading for a karate seminar, which was good fun. It was really enjoyable. I hurt my toe, but it was really enjoyable. Really enjoyed it. But it was 3 hours of karate at the price of 4 hours of driving. So that was an interest. That was a long day. It was a very long day. And then the day after, I helped run a grading about half an hour away, and that's whilst I'm not doing it, and they're exhausting when you're on the receiving end, as it were. They're exhausting things. Even running them is hard work. You know, it's not an easy thing to run either, because you've got to be switched on and making sure that you're looking for the right things and kind of all this jazz. So I had a very busy weekend, compounded by worrying about petrol prices, which didn't help.
Well, I had a similar ratio of driving to activity. I think I did about 6 or 7 hours driving to 4 or 5 hours cycling because I went cycling around Cambridgeshire. It's a long way to go to cycle on the flat, but it is pretty flat around there. So not much in the way of gradient, but did mean it was very fast, which was quite good fun. And it didn't rain for the first time in several weeks of me going out cycling. So
I mean, there's a lot of hills around here, so yeah, that's probably a bit novel.
Yes, it is quite hilly where I go normally. Not very big hills though, just lots of them. But it was quite novel to cycle on the flat. But lots of driving for me this weekend as well. Anyway, we're not here to talk about driving to our favorite hobby activities. We are here to talk about what's new in the world of AWS. And as regular listeners to the podcast will know, once a week I curate a list of AWS news, which I share via my weekly AWS News Roundup newsletter. And then John picks a selection of articles that we'd like to talk about on the podcast. So we do, of course, have such a selection to chat through this week. The first is an blog post on the AWS Developer Tools blog announcing new output formats in AWS CLI v2. So I'm not a CLI user, as again, regular listeners to the podcast may know. I'm the less technical of the out of the two of us on this call. I understand. I know what CLI stands for, of course, but I'm not a regular CLI user. So new output formats are not going to mean a great deal to me, but I'm sure they do to you, John, and to the vast majority of our listeners as well. So tell us about these new output formats in AWS CLI v2.
They're new and they're output formats. And I haven't read the article. I usually rely for this thing on being able to talk about things in broad terms and then throw it over to a guest, but we don't have one this week, and I should have read the paperwork. So let's see if we can make stuff up on the fly. Okay. So V1 of the CLI was functional but horrible. V2 of the CLI has been around for a while, and it's better, more kind of option flags and things like that, and you could pass things in, which was good. Now we have some output formats, and the more interesting thing is there's now an enhanced output format, which is really useful. I know, which is really, really useful for debugging errors, which if you spend enough time on the CLI, you will hit them. It might be permissions. It might be you've given it a flag wrong. It might be that you put something in incorrectly. It might be invariably it's one of those things, right? You've done something wrong or you don't have permissions. Those tend to be the actual problems. But it's very hard sometimes to actually work out what the problem was, because it might be a very simple typo in an enormous great chain of commands or in a very long name of something, and it's hard to work out kind of exactly where the problem is. What this update is doing is it's giving us extra formats for the error, which is great. So you've still got the legacy one, which is useful because it's therefore backwards compatible. You can spit things out in a table, in YAML, in JSON, in just text, or the new one, which is enhanced. I think a lot of these are new, but the enhanced is the one that's kind of more interesting to me, which gives you a better error message and more details displayed in line. The examples that they're giving you is using the enhanced output error if you try to do a get object on a bucket that doesn't exist, rather than just giving you a error, can't find it, which is, well, what can't you find? Can't you find the bucket? Can't you find the region? Can't you find the whatever? Yeah. It's now saying no such bucket. That's great, because all of a sudden you've gone, oh, I've got the bucket name wrong because I've typed it wrong or whatever. It's helping you really narrow in on the thing that you've done wrong or the thing that is wrong. There's a couple of others that are kind of useful, and okay, there's legacy outputs as well, which is, it's still there, but it's useful still, and you can do it in JSON if you're using it to parse things, right? So you can get the JSON output if you're calling the CLI from something else, which is useful if you're parsing things, as I say. Or there's the legacy setup. But as I say, the enhanced one is very useful because you then get additional detail. So it's no such bucket. The bucket was this. Cool. It really helps you kind of narrow the problem down. And the other thing that's quite useful in this change is you can now turn off CLI output, which is really handy as well, because in some cases, and again, the example they use here is the standard out gets suppressed, which if you're pulling something like a secrets out of Secrets Manager or a secure parameter out of SSM Secure, then you don't necessarily want those echoing out into standard out, particularly if you're doing them in scripts and what have you. You just want it to pull into the variable that you've kind of assigned it to, right? So you go variable equals output of this command. You don't necessarily want that to go into standard out. You want it to go kind of somewhere. The example that they're using here is creating a secret, and that's quite useful because when you create a secret, it actually echoes itself back out on the command line, which always to me felt a bit iffy. So if you're doing proper variable replacement and you're passing it in as a secure secret, you don't necessarily want that to spit back out in the log files, and this is, letting you not do that. So minor change, minor update, but worth having, absolutely. If you've got your CLI installed in a couple of ways, it should update itself. If you've got it installed in ways that will update itself. If not, go get your update. So, do a brew update, go and install the latest version if you're on Windows, and you have my deepest sympathies if you're using any of the things on Windows. But go get the update. It's available as of version 234.
Do you spend much time in the CLI yourself?
Yes and no. It varies. I spend a reasonable amount of time in the CLI, although these days Kiro is spending most of the time in the CLI for me.
I think I still have it installed from that workshop we did, and I don't know how to uninstall it. I keep getting updates for it on my Mac occasionally, so that's still there.
Yeah, no, it's one of those funny things that even as a non-engineering type, every so often you do still find that you need it, because there's the odd thing that you just can't do any other way, which is very frustrating, I imagine, for non-technicals, as it were. But I want to download, and S3 is a great example, right? I want to download the entire contents of this bucket, please. You can't do that in the console. There's no download all. You would have to do it one object at a time. The only way of doing that is through the API or a CLI command. So every once in a while, that's a, John, can you help me do this? Yes, here's a script sort of output. And there's the only way of doing it. So yeah, even as a non-technical, although you are pro certified, man, technically-ish, even as a non-engineering type, you can't get away from having it.
I have used it in labs, mostly for training, for certifications. Yeah. Not really in anger. Yeah.
I thought, the only time I use it in anger is when I'm doing certifications. The rest of the time I'm pretty chill.
Well, on that note, let's move along to our second article for this week. Lots of news about this one, lots of different articles from different perspectives about the strategic partnership announced last week between OpenAI and Amazon. This particular article that we shared in the newsletter and will share in the show notes is OpenAI's announcement of the partnership. Amazon had their announcement on their side, and the press covered it quite a lot as well. And the latest announcement is that OpenAI is going to consume 2 gigawatts of Trainium capacity through AWS infrastructure to support demand for stateful runtime environment, frontier, and other advanced workloads. And I think on the AWS side, those things are going to be distributed via Bedrock for AWS customers to consume via the Bedrock marketplace, I guess, for want of a better term. Bedrock service. So, John, thoughts on this one?
So we kind of spoke about this a little bit. Was it last week, week before? I don't know. In one of these really cyclic deals that I'm convinced should be illegal because they just should be. But this is, I read, I think it was Corey Quinn's write up on this. There's a whole lot of mental gymnastics going on to make this seem like a good deal for Amazon because obviously they're going to do this mental gymnastics. It's an absolute shed load of money that they've given to OpenAI. Although the 50 billion isn't 50 billion right now, it's 15 right now and 35 when certain conditions are met. And I'm pretty sure we spoke about this last week with Jen when we were, you've got to hit this, that, or the other to unlock some more money. That's what we think is going on because that kind of makes sense. In terms of these things to unlock more money, consuming the 2 gigawatts of Trainium capacity, I've no idea what that translates to in real person terms because, okay, yes, it's CPU capacity, so you would think about it in terms of the amount of power, I guess, that it's using. But no one outside of the engineering teams within the data centers actually knows how much that is. So it's. I think they've got big number itis, and they've gone, that sounds like a big number. We'll put that in the press release. Let's put that in the. We've got no idea what that relates to in real terms. Is that 10 million chips? Is that 10 chips? Is that 10 trillion chips? Is that X number of hours of chip usage? We have no idea what that means, right? We've got no idea what that means. The follow-up piece of this as well is they are the exclusive third-party cloud distribution for such and such and such a thing, right? For AI agents and stateful workloads. And there's stateful developer environments. And that's quite important because from my understanding, Azure has unique and is the only distributor I think that can do stateless stuff for AI models, and most AI things are stateless if you think about it. You send requests to API endpoint, it responds. That's stateless. That's kind of how most people consume LLMs these days, and that seems to be pretty much exclusively Azure for OpenAI these days. So there seems to be a lot of hurdle jumping, hoop climbing. It's almost like, do you ever see that game show, The Wall, where people have to get in like silly positions to sort of win and go through the wall? It seems like they're doing that. Okay, well, I mean, I've only seen clips of it, I must admit, but it's the sort of thing that comes to mind, that they're craning themselves into this really bizarre shape in order to make it sound like a good deal for them, when in truth, what I think they've done is they've just put some money in a company that Microsoft owns. Like, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing because generally I don't think AI is a bad thing. I think it could be a bad thing, but this just sounds like an awful lot of wrangling and legalese to make things sound good.
Yeah, I think when we spoke to Jen about it last week, her view was that AWS are not selling Trainium chips fast enough. So a deal like this will make it appear that they are, I guess. And I had a quick. I asked AI how many chips equates to 2 gigawatts of power, and it's between 1 to 2 million AI chips. Given that a Trainium chip
still a very big
currently
range.
running at about 1,000 watts of power. Well, I guess it depends because they're not all the same, are they? So you've got Trainium 3, Trainium 4, and I see you've got different specs of chip. So could be a million of one type or 2 million of another type, but it's a lot of chips. It's a lot of chips. It's a pretty big commitment.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's no one else is doing it, so we're going to force you to eat them. Okay, and so we're going to force you to eat them by paying you to eat them and wrapping it up in a contract and making it sound good for us. Something about it stinks. I couldn't tell you what, but something stinks.
Well, we're back to the bubble, aren't we? And it's getting bigger. And at what point is it going to burst? We shall have to wait and see. What is going to be driving the return on this investment? That's for the part that I still don't understand. I don't think it's people paying 20 quid a month for ChatGPT, or 20 quid a month, or 40 quid a month for Codex, which I think is the AI. Is it Codex, the OpenAI coding assistant?
I've no idea.
Yeah. Or maybe it is. Maybe it is. Mass adoption of those things is enough to.
Is it really? I don't even think that's enough to offset the amount of money being spent by the people using the free tier stuff, if I'm honest. Because that's always AI as an aside, which is a very bizarre thing to say. But AI as an aside, the Spotify model is kind of what we're looking at here, right? Which is the premium users pay enough to pay for the free tier users and some profit at the end, right? Because the rate at which they pay money is so much higher than the cost of running the service because they don't like ads, for argument's sake, right? And I think these days Spotify puts ads in, and I don't know if it breaks even on their free tier or if it just kind of starts to eat the cost a little bit. I don't know. But that's what we're looking at here, right? Is there's a free tier, which is limited in some capacity, and then there's a paid tier, which is still limited in some capacity, but the limits are a lot higher. I don't think the paid for users pay for themselves, let alone covering the free tier users. So I really doubt that that's what's going to be turning the cogs on this one. But I suppose we'll see.
I don't know if you saw the infographic that one of our colleagues shared on Slack last week with the dots and
yes, which each dot was a bizarre 3.2 million people or some kind of weird number to make the dots work.
So maybe this is what they're looking at, because there's an awful lot of dots with no adoption of AI whatsoever. Paid adoption versus free adoption is, like, I mean, I don't even know. Is that maybe a 20th or a 50th of the overall number of people using free AI that are paying for it? But a huge amount of white space or gray space on this particular infographic of people not using AI. So maybe that's what is driving all of this investment, that there's an assumption that at some point we're all going to be using it. But right now, most of us aren't. So
I suppose you might very well be right, because we are somewhat at the leading edge, bleeding edge, the cutting edge, the whatever you want to call it, edge, of this, because we're very exposed to it. And I think we had this conversation last week or the week before, where we are very exposed to it. So everything feels very painful to us. Everything feels very kind of new and exciting, and this doesn't make sense, and so on and so on and so on. Most people don't use this at all, right? You talk to people and they go, chat bot something, something, something. No, chat GPT stands for generative pre-trained. It's not GTP. It's not. And then you say, oh, which one are you using? Oh, I use Claude. Okay, which model? What's a model? And this is from people that are using it, right? Like, I've had this conversation with people outside of work that use these things still in their jobs. And so I use Claude. Which one do you use? Just Claude. Okay, there's like 20 models. Like, pick. Tell me which one you're using. Is it Sonnet? Is it Opus? Is it 4? Is it 4.6? Is it 4.5? Is it 3.5? Like, come on, give me some more things here. Okay,
set
cool.
automatic.
Yeah, exactly.
Set to automatic. Yeah.
it just works for me. Thank you very much. It just does the thing that I need it to do. And again, though, these people are either paying for it, and if they're paying for it, they're not paying very much for it, or they're not paying at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the bigwigs at OpenAI and Amazon and other AI companies are hoping that those people who are not using it at all are going to become paid users at some point. And therefore, there will be some return on all this investment. So,
well, there's going to have to be, or there's not going to be an economy left.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, any time will tell. We shall see. On that note, let's move along to our third article this week, and something we have spoken about on the podcast before, but I picked this one out because it's written by a former podcast guest. So this is all about Lambda Heavy, as another former podcast guest referred to it. But the article's not written by Brian. This is an article written by Danielle Heberling, who I think was on the episode 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I think we may have discussed Lambda durable functions with Danielle when she was on the podcast, but we've definitely discussed it once or twice before. But this is an article that Danielle wrote on her own blog, all about how she rewrote her step function as a durable function, or Lambda Heavy, as Brian likes to call it. So, John, I know you've always been a fan of step functions. Not sure if you've managed to get your hands dirty yet on a Lambda durable function, but it seems that Danielle has. So what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, I think I inspired this because I was talking about this on that podcast, I think. So I think I can claim credit for the inspiration for this one.
Fair enough. Will you put that on your community builder reporting tool? I inspired this blog post.
I don't know if that counts for renewal. Probably not, because I need to do that still.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good point. Yep.
Yes, and I went down the complete rabbit hole. I tell you what, complete tangent, but I went down a bit of a rabbit hole of finding, because, you need to submit public-facing evidence that you're still doing things for the community, right? Which is fair enough, because you've got to provide evidence when you apply in the first place. Fine, makes sense. And then I went off down the rabbit hole trying to find the link to the agenda for the London Summit last year, because I spoke at that and I thought, yeah, I'll use that. That's a good one to use. Wonderful. It had my name on it. It's on an Amazon website, all this jazz. It's gone. It's just gone because the 2026 Summit is now kicking around. You can't find it. It's just gone. And even the Wayback Machine doesn't have it. Like, it's got the
Really?
site.
It's not on the Wayback Machine.
It's got the site is on the Wayback Machine, but the way the agenda, I think, loads in, it just never loads. I think it's something to do with how it's presented, like in real
dynamic
time.
content.
It just never loads it. So I can't use that. And I had a full-on existential crisis in the community builders Slack group about it. And then, to be fair, former podcast guest Damien said, hang on, didn't you speak here as well? Yeah, right, I'll use that one.
I have a photo of you speaking at the summit. Can't you just submit that as your evidence?
I don't know, maybe. It feels a bit. It feels a bit
photographic evidence.
It feels a bit iffy. I did also got picked up and said, well, if you happen to do a podcast with Carl and you had like 40 episodes in the previous year, then that would also count. If only you'd done that. Like, yeah, all right, fine, smart ass. That's cheating. I do them anyway. That's cheating. But I suppose it's probably not.
It'll do.
Yes, but no, I don't think I can probably claim that in content reporting or in renewals, which is a shame. But back on message. So no, I haven't had a chance to get hands on with Lambda Heavy. It's kind of on the list of things I want to play with because I'm a big fan of a step function. As I've said a few times on this podcast, we take the outputs from this recording and we run it through a step function. It's got a handful of lambdas behind it that do a few things. And it does things like triggers the transcoding so that we get this in several different formats because Spotify's a pain in the bum. It does transcription so that we can then get the transcription out of it, and then we can process that for blog posts and for shorts and for clips and for, everything else. Wonderful. And that's on my list of things to update because I think at the end of this month, the version of models, again, the version of Claude that we're using, which was 3.5 V1 Sonnet, I want to say, I don't remember, goes end of life and starts costing like 6 times as much money. So I need to actually do a model evaluation, update the model, update to use the, what's the name of it? The chat API.
Claude.
It's Converse, the Converse API, rather than using the Claude one directly, so that we can then kind of be a bit more fussy with models and potentially play with some other models as well. But time and availability. But one of the things I could look at doing at the same time, and I might do, is can we take it out of a step function entirely, stick it in a Lambda durable function? Does that make a difference to the processing time? Does that make a difference to the speed? Does that make a difference to the cost? Right? But because it's all a marketing hobby project, it's very debatable whether I'm going to do that versus do the bare minimum work of just getting it to run a bit more cheaply.
Well, it would get you another talk. And Danielle's already written the post for you, so
it would. It absolutely would. And to be fair, in the last talk that I did say there's still more to come. So maybe I should have to do that so that I can then do that. Although, admittedly, the talk that I'm shopping at the minute is more about some internal tooling that I built, which is equally cool, but it's not this. So, in terms of Danielle's article, it's well written, as are all of her things. To be really honest, they're very good writer. Interesting sort of side-by-side comparison. So rather than doing it in JSON and YAML, you do it in TypeScript. I don't know if you can do it in Python because TypeScript makes me want to vomit. State management is a little bit different. You've got to manage a little bit more yourself from what I'm reading here. The conditional logic, though, because it's in just normal code, is simpler, right? Because you don't have these conditional logic in step functions and loops and step functions and parallels and what have you, is a pain, right? It's a real pain. Loops and step functions are a real pain in the backside because you've got to have 2 or 3 different lambdas to process things and choice states and all sorts, right? Versus it's just normal programming language. Cool. There are going to be a couple of gotchas, which, to be fair, Danielle sort of put out, and just things around functions versus ARNs versus versions and aliases and bits and pieces like that. But that might be a CDK gotcha rather than anything else. And I won't use CDK because I don't like it. It still turns out that, yes, this is very much a personal choice because I really do still like the visual element of step functions, right? Because you get this really nice graph, which again is great to put on a PowerPoint for a talk, because then I don't have to make the diagram. The diagram is made for me. and it does fan out better. Step Functions does still have much better native service integrations because it has native service integrations. I'm not using them hugely. I'm using them in a few places, sure, for things like the transcoding and the transcription and what have you, but largely it's also just Lambdas. And if you've done, like I've done in the past, where all your step function is doing is orchestrating Lambdas, then those service integrations aren't particularly useful to you. But if you are more of a developer than a dev ops or an ops or an sysadmin sort of person, and I come more from the platformy side of things, from the I used to be an environments manager and release manager, those kind of things, so I come much more from that world than from being a hardline developer. So doing everything in Python or in TypeScript or whatever, that's not a great appeal to me because I don't particularly care for it. But if that's something that you like, then you should probably look at durable functions instead, because so far as I can work out, whilst they're not kind of a one-to-one, you can use them interchangeably with each other. A lot of the benefits of durable functions versus step functions in terms of how long they can execute for, how long they can sit and wait for, is pretty similar.
She does link out to some AWS specific guidance in the post about when to use durable functions or step functions. And I'll just read this out, but you can click the link in the article to see this for yourself. So when to use durable functions, use them if your team prefers standard programming languages and familiar development tools. Your app logic is primarily within Lambda functions. You want fine-grained control over execution state in code. You're building Lambda-centric applications with tight coupling between workflow and business logic, and you want to iterate quickly without switching between code and visual or JSON designers. When to use step functions, you need a visual workflow representation for cross-team visibility. You're orchestrating multiple AWS services and want native integrations without custom SDK code. You require zero maintenance infrastructure, no patching or runtime updates, because obviously if you're using Lambda, you are going to need to patch and update your Lambda runtimes periodically, as and when AWS update them. And final point on when to use step functions: non-technical stakeholders need to understand and validate workflow logic. So people like me can look at a flowchart and go, yes, I can see what's going on there, rather than looking at some code and thinking, I have no idea what that means. So there we go. That's a great post from Danielle about why she did it, and linking out to the specific advice from AWS on when to use one over the other. But I think it'd be great for you, John, to completely rewrite your step function in a durable function, and then go on tour with podcast Adventures in AI Part 2.
Part 3, actually.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, because I did the first version of kind of here's what it looked like. We hacked it all together, and this is kind of what we did. We went from nothing to such and such a thing. But admittedly, part one never really saw the light of day. I think I did a lightning talk on it at a local user group in about 15 minutes, but that was all that ever saw the light of day, right? So unless you're in that room or watch that one very specific recording, and I think about 9 people did, then you would never have seen, part 1. Part 2 was seen by rather more people because it got picked up and it was kind of a bit more interesting.
There we go, part 3, and French for 3 is trois, in case you were struggling for that one. After I said,
I don't. I speak a tiny bit of French. I can order a beer and a sandwich.
3 beers.
I can now.
There we go.
I can do it in Japanese.
Great learning from Logicast today.
I can do it in Japanese. I'll have San Asahi.
Well, other types of beer are available.
The only Japanese one I know.
Yeah, me too. Sapporo. Yeah. Anyway, we're not here to talk about Japanese beer. Let's move on to our 4th post this week. This is an article on the AWS Architecture blog, and the title is The Hidden Price Tag, Uncovering Hidden Costs in Cloud Architectures with the AWS Well-Architected Framework. So we talk a lot about cloud cost optimization, FinOps, so on and so forth. And obviously, as a well-architected partner, we're regularly conducting these reviews for our customers. But why might one specifically use the well-architected framework to uncover hidden costs? Because there are many other ways to uncover hidden costs, but this obviously is talking specifically about well-architected as a tool to uncover hidden costs.
Well, I don't really know, right? Because the well-architected framework, I suppose it's pulling your attention at it from a couple of different lenses. Okay. And hidden costs is it's costs that you're not aware of or costs that you shouldn't be spending. Cool. And there's two, I think, key pillars within the well-architected framework that you would worry about costs. Okay. There's cost optimization, which is the obvious one, which is, for what we are doing, can we do it as cheaply as possible? Are we doing multiple NAT gateways where we only need one because it's not production? Are we doing reserved instances, savings plans where we should be doing those things? Are we right-sizing our instances to make sure that they're as cheap as possible? Wonderful. And then the other one is performance efficiency, which you don't necessarily think of as a cost pillar, but it kind of is, because performance efficiency kind of threads the needle between cost optimization and what's the other one? It is operational best practice. I forget the actual name of that pillar.
Excellence. Operational excellence.
That's the one. And it kind of threads the needle between operational excellence and cost optimization. And performance efficiency sort of sits in the middle there, which is not necessarily drive the bill as low as possible. It's work out where the middle ground is between making sure that the architecture is performant and resilient and all the rest of it as possible, whilst being as cheap as possible to maintain those targets, right? Because think about it. The cheapest way of doing something is usually one slightly crap server sitting in one availability zone with no backups and no nothing. Operational excellence is going to be high availability, multiple servers, scaling, possibly using a managed service. It's going to have lots of redundancy in place. And okay, reliability is another pillar, but it's going to have lots of redundancy in place. There's going to be multiple NAT gateways. There's going to be a lot of network traffic moving around. There's going to be flow logs and things potentially turned on, and so on and so on. And the price difference between those two is quite big. It's potentially massive. And performance efficiency tries to kind of thread the needle between the middle of those to make sure that you're getting as much as you possibly can out of the money that you're able to spend. It's not keep it as low as possible. It's not do it as well as possible. It's trade those off against each other and thread the needle down the middle. So I suppose it's forcing you to think about your workloads from that angle, as well as from doing it as cheaply as possible. And then it's putting in business context on top of that, right? Because you layer the context on top, and then all of a sudden, some of the things that these cost optimization tools look at don't make sense anymore, right? It's why have you got all of these snapshots? Well, because we are legally required to keep them because of SOC 2 or whatever. And we've got to hang on to them for 7 years. But you could save a lot of money by deleting them. We could save a lot of money on our Amazon bill by deleting them, yes, but we could spend a lot of money in regulatory fines instead. And I'd rather not do that.
Yeah, and I think the article goes on to talk about it's not just about cost optimization and FinOps. It's about other potential hidden costs. So, and I think it talks through pretty much all of the pillars. So, security, for example, the hidden cost of a breach. So it's not just about what you're spending or how you're buying it. It's what you're protecting yourself from. And I guess the same applies to reliability. What is the hidden cost of downtime if you have an unreliable platform and you're unable to trade or do whatever it is that your online application does? So, yes, lots of hidden costs potentially there that people don't think about if you're thinking purely about cost optimization and FinOps.
Yes, because hidden cost is a funny one, right? Because we think, and I do it, and I just did it, right? We think in terms of direct cost. We think of the AWS bill. We think of the regulatory bill. We think of customer bills, whatever. We think in terms of direct cost. But the hidden cost, as you say, of the app going down is, well, you're still paying for all the resources to exist. But if you're a transactional site, people can't give you their money, which is probably quite a high cost, right? We've had customers in the past. We've had customers that it's tens of thousands per hour of them not being able to trade. It's vast amounts of money that they're not able to transact when it's down. And if it's down for more than a few minutes at a time, or if it's down, in the middle of the day or whatever, then that is compounded because they're not 24/7 trading. Okay, site's up 24/7, but they're, I don't know, based in a particular territory. Maybe they're based in California, and people aren't buying things at midnight because of what their business does. So their business hours, whilst the site's up, is truncated to kind of like 12 hours a day or whatever. And if you get a decent sized outage within your business hours, then that's going to hurt.
Absolutely. Well, the well-architected framework is available to all AWS customers. You can spin up the well-architected tool in your AWS account and go through the review process and get yourself a custom report. But as the article recommends, you can also lean on AWS's extensive network of solutions architects, technical account managers, and AWS Well-Architected partners such as yours truly. So something that John and I are regularly doing on behalf of Logicata customers. So little Logicata plug there. We don't normally do that on the podcast, but it seemed to fit there. So on that note, let's move along to our final article for this week. This is an article on the Register, and actually, I didn't realize there was so many things in this article because what I really wanted to talk about was the fact that AWS data centers in the UAE were specifically targeted by Iranian drones in the current conflict that has broken out over there. And I think certainly according to some reports that I read about this particular issue last week, this is the first time in a conflict that data centers have been specifically targeted by one of the factions, shall we say. And this did actually cause some problems, did cause some downtime, caused a power outage, certainly in one of the facilities, caused some apps to have some downtime. I think Kareem was one of them, the ride-sharing app in Dubai and the UAE, the Uber of Dubai, if you like. Some pretty high-profile apps in the area did have some downtime caused by these drone attacks. So I guess a bit of a watershed moment in terms of conflicts, particularly in that region, that now data centers are being specifically targeted. So what are your thoughts on this, John?
I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? Because this is probably the first time it's happened, because it's probably the first time that a conflict, and I'm going to choose my words very carefully here because I don't want to get cancelled, has happened within range of somewhere that's got this sort of built up infrastructure, right? Recent conflicts that we've seen have been in Central Eastern Europe, where there's not this kind of big build-up of that sort of thing. There's no viable reason to be targeting them, so on and so on. But when you start talking about taking out, because all of these things are multiple fronts, you think about military targets and you think about economic targets. This is absolutely an economic target, because if you stop people's ability to trade and make money, it's the same thing as sanctioning economies. Effectively, they start just struggling, and that's another thing, and it demoralizes people and so on and so on. In terms of the actual technical detail of what's gone on, no one, I think, has really confirmed. Certainly Amazon didn't, but I would imagine that they would, what actually went on. But the short version is objects, debris, whatever, hit data center, damaged data center, caused fire. Fire suppression kicked in, local fire department killed power. Standard sort of response to these sorts of things. You've got lots of things with lots of electricity that might catch fire, and stuff's on fire. So fire suppression did its job, and then that made everything in the room somewhat useless, because that's what fire. I don't know if you've ever seen fire suppression in a data center, but that kind of kills everything. You don't want to be in the room when it goes off. You really don't.
Yeah, I mean, it depends what type of fire suppression, I suppose, isn't it? You don't want to be in the room when halon goes off, because you won't be able to breathe anymore, but it doesn't kill the servers. Whereas if it's water, which it generally isn't, but
no, it doesn't tend to be. But I mean, I had a fire in my house a few years ago now, and granted, I don't have halon gas, but I did happen to have a combination fire extinguisher, and that worked really, really well. But everything it touched had to be replaced, because it's this disgusting bicarbonate foam. It's grim. But yes, so fire suppression kicked in, some damage happened, possibly as a result of that. The fire department shut the power off whilst they could get the fire put out. And the fire department will absolutely have just used water, because they turn up with shed loads of water, not necessarily because it's the correct thing for putting the fires out, but because if you've got a very big fire, you stand behind a cone of water and it's not getting you. It's more of a shielding sort of effect. So yeah, it's interesting. Certainly, as you say, watershed moment, because I don't think we've heard of this before, does prove things that we've all known, which is the cloud is not infallible, right? And if you are concerned that the entire region might go down, and that's an actual business risk to you, then you should certainly think about being multi-region. And this kind of flies in the face of what I've been saying for many, many, many years, which is, well, if the entire London region goes down, I'm sorry, I've got bigger problems. I'm just going to go and have I'm going to go and have a drink. I'm going to go and make some lunch, because I've got bigger issues. If the entire London region goes down, that's not on me to try and fix that and keep the business running. But if you are in a position where it is on you to keep the business running, to keep the lights on and all the rest of it, you do need to think about being multi-region.
Yeah, and the entire region doesn't need to go down. Just the bit that you're using needs to go down,
Yes.
which
And
is
this
what
was the
happened
thing.
here. The whole thing didn't go down. It's not that the entire data centers disappeared in a ball of flames. It was an isolated attack on multiple facilities, as I understand it, and it caused problems for parts of those facilities, not for all of those facilities, but it caused problems in parts that certain businesses were relying on. And if they had some multi-region resilience, they would have been able to continue. They
We
wouldn't
see
have
this.
noticed the
We see
outage.
this in less kind of catastrophic ways sometimes when US East One goes down, because people tend to rely on US East One for certain things. And again, that's not necessarily multi-region, but that's accepting the fact that bits of it could go down. And if you lose bits of the control plane, and talk about the well-architected framework, that's one of the questions about talking about data versus control planes for recovery. If you rely on access to the control plane and shared services to do your recovery, if that goes away, you can't recover.
Yep. So, what's the do you think this is going to be a risk going forwards? I guess this was a relatively small attack because some attacks have been using drones, some have been using missiles. So no missiles were launched at the data centers, but I think the outcome may have been somewhat different had it been a missile attack on the data center. Do data centers now need to start protecting themselves from these
Well, data
types of
centers have
attacks?
been targets of attacks, regardless of the source, since their inception, right? Because if you want to do actual economic damage to something, and it doesn't have to be with, physical damage, it could be with cyber attacks and kind of all the rest of it, then you do need to worry about that if you're running a data center, because they have always been targets. They're reasonably soft targets too, because it's just a building. You can just walk right in. Okay, you can't just walk right in. There's security. But if you don't really care about that sort of thing, they're not that hard things to break into.
I
So
mean,
they've always been targets.
they've always been targets, and usually their physical security on the ground is pretty good. So, you need government issued photo ID. You're probably going to need to have your bag searched. You go through man trap doors that weigh you on the way in and the way out to make sure that you're not carrying something that you shouldn't have been either on the way in or on the way out. That kind of thing, So there's all these kind of security measures that have been in place. But I guess my question is, do they now need the equivalent of the Iron Dome over every data center to ward off any inbound airborne attacks? I'm
I
sure
think
somebody's launching a startup if they haven't already for this. But is that a step too far?
I think, yeah, this is, you start talking about scaremongering and fearmongering, I think, to a little bit there, and just sort of the economies of FUD, as it were. I think economically, no one could afford to do that.
Well, it would certainly push up the cost of AI more than just the chips. If we've now got to put an Iron Dome above every AI data center that's being built to shoot down any inbound flying objects, and then of course you've got the risk that you shoot down something that you shouldn't have shot down.
It's a
because actually it
hard
wasn't coming
problem.
for you. But,
It's a hard problem, and I don't think we're going to see it solved in the next 10 minutes.
Oh, definitely not. No. Well, I don't think we've got another 10 minutes, have we? This is, we are at the end of the episode, but we could sit here in silence for 10 minutes and, see if we've come up with something by the end of it. But I don't think that would be very entertaining for the listeners, would it? So, but yes, it is a challenge. It is a challenge, and not a good one. I should add. But anyway, on that note, we have reached the end of our time for season 5, episode 10 of Logicast. So thank you very much for joining us today. Apologies, we did not have a guest to share their insights, but we did, of course, have the ever dependable principal cloud engineer, John Goodall, sharing his insights with us today. So thank you, John, as always, for sharing your insights. We will be back next week with another episode of Logicast for you, hopefully with a guest next time round. Until then, if you've enjoyed it, please give us a like, follow our YouTube channel, do tell your friends. We are available to download from wherever you download your podcasts. And that's it. That's all we've got time for. We'll be back next week. See you again next time.